And her mother puts her finger in her face and says, "If you get the stories mixed up, they're going to think you are lying." Now, did I put those emphasis on the words myself? No, that's the emphasis that the mom put in the video. I thought it was interesting. You are lying. Hello and welcome to Jurors in Disguise, the podcast that exposes jurors who lie. Last week we left off at the end of Martin's trial. Tonight I'm going to rewind a little bit and tell you how Martin Peterson ended up on trial literally for his life. Today we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to move on to the time period from the conviction to sentencing and give you some details of what happened there. When we were dating, Martin gave me 18 pages of documents that he had written and put together for his attorneys to help them understand how he ended up where he was, and also to give them some direction as to who they could talk to and the things that they could follow up on to verify his stories. So I'm going to read a little bit, just a little bit, of the things that he said in that document. He said he met his wife in 2004. He married her. Her son and daughter signed the marriage license as witnesses to the ceremony. After that, he adopted them, and he said he was so proud when he stood in front of the judge with the kids, and they said that they wanted him to be their dad. He had never been married before. He was 38 years old and always wanted a family. They lived in Martin's first house for about a year. Then they moved into a beautiful new home that Martin had built and designed on 2 acres of wooded property. That's when I met him. He was at that house, and it was lovely. In fact, I walked in and I said, "Wow, you live here by yourself?" Because there was a beautiful candle burning and it smelled good and everything was just neat and tidy. I was really impressed. But he said everything was going great until the housing market crashed in 2008. He had to sell his dump truck company and fire his drivers, which he said was really hard. The financial strain, though, and also the fact that he was gone a lot, caused his marriage to really suffer. By 2009, Martin suspected his wife of having an affair because she would spend a lot of time on the phone talking in private. He accused her of cheating on him, and she denied it, but she wouldn't go to counseling. Things just kept getting worse, he said. So in May of 2010, he told her he wanted a divorce, and then he went back out on the road to go to work. He was gone for 2 weeks. He got home on a Saturday, and his daughter went with him to run errands, go to Walmart. She wanted some fake nails, and he said, "I'll buy them for you, but you have to promise that when you get home on Monday, you will come straight home from school and you'll clean your room and do your chores." She said, "Okay." So after school on Monday, she went to her best friend's house, though. She did not go home until about 5 p.m. When she got home, Martin took away her cell phone and her laptop, which was customary for punishment. He said, "You'll get them back when you clean your room and do your chores like you promised." Well, this time, he said, was different. She got really angry, and she said, "I'll get my stuff back. You'll see." And he said, "No, you're not getting them back until you do your chores." He went outside to grill, and after supper, he said he laid down on the couch and fell asleep. When he woke up several hours later, his wife and kids were gone. He called, and she answered, and he said, "Where did you go?" She said, "Well, I had to get away. I needed time to think." This left him very confused. The next day, he went to the sheriff's office and met with the detective after a phone call asking him to come down. When confronted with the accusations, he denied ever abusing his daughter. The detective told him he wouldn't be allowed to stay at his house, but he could go back with the deputy to get a few things. He did, and when he left, he took his daughter's cell phone and laptop, which he still had in his possession from the night before. In fact, he showed them to me. His wife was told by the Child Protective Services to take their daughter for a medical exam. She refused, had to be ordered 2 weeks later. The exam revealed that their 15-year-old daughter was still a virgin and that there were no indications of sexual abuse, according to the detective's notes. Martin said he waited over a month for his wife to file for divorce, thinking surely she would, but she didn't, so he did. When he went to the divorce hearing a year later, he was arrested and charged with the accusations. That was Martin's side of the story. But, we had gone through trial and he was convicted, so I wanted to know more. I went to his attorney's office and asked her for copies of everything. I said, "I want all the discovery, depositions, videos, everything you've got, interviews, anything you have in Martin's case." She was kind and gave this to me. When I got back to the house, I looked in the box and there were the videos of Martin and his then wife and daughter as they had been interviewed by the detective at the sheriff's office. Now, remember, these false allegations were set on a Monday night, and the videos were taken the very next day at the sheriff's office. In the first video, the detective was talking with Martin's then wife. The first thing, he had put their daughter, in a separate room, so he separated them. And the first thing he asked Martin's then wife was, "Are you seeing anybody?" She giggled and said, and I quote, "I have an ex-boyfriend I've been talking to, but when he's gone." She went on to talk about the events the night before, which gave me some insight as to her opinion, because all I knew was that Martin woke up and everyone was gone. She said that their daughter gave her a note while Martin was outside grilling, disclosing the supposed abuse. She read it and said, "Go write more." To this day, I don't understand that, but that's what she said. So the daughter wrote a second note. The mother said she didn't know what to do, so she called her sister, who called the sheriff's office. Shortly after that, while Martin was asleep on the couch, she met the deputy outside and she gave him the two notes. She said, "Our daughter wrote me this note first and gave it to me." So the detective marked it RK1 purple note because it was written in purple ink. Then she said, "Then I told her to write more and she gave me this note," and she gave him the second note and he labeled it RK1 note in blue ink because it was written in blue ink. The deputy told them that they would need to find a place to stay for the night, so they did. They went to a hotel, and the morning is when they met with the detective at the sheriff's office. After talking with Martin's then wife, the detective went to interview the daughter. We don't have that interview because the detective later disclosed that the video had been destroyed by persons unknown. However, we have an idea of what was said because I have a copy of the detective's notes, and the detective also left the daughter's room and went back in the room with Martin's then wife and told her what the daughter had just said. I understand a lot of this sounds like hearsay, but I assure you I can back it up with black and white documents. So the detective told Martin's then wife that the daughter said she'd given a note to her best friend while they were in her bedroom saying that Martin had sexually abused her. Her friend told her to write another note and give it to her mom, which she did. Now, she was not clear on exactly when this occurred. When she was pressed for when did that happen between her and her best friend, she said it was a few days ago and then later said it was 2 weeks ago. So as you will see and as you will hear continuing, Martin's daughter tended to get the stories mixed up. Next, the detective brought the daughter into the room with the mother and he left them alone for quite a while. That's the most compelling video of all. It was quite entertaining and it was also very enlightening because as soon as he left the room, the mother began to tell the daughter she was upset because the daughter had just told the detective something different than what she had told her at home the night before. The daughter starts squirming around in her chair and her mother puts her finger in her face and says, excuse me, if you get the stories mixed up, they're going to think you are lying." Now, did I put those emphasis on the words myself? No, that's the emphasis that the mom put in the video. I thought it was interesting. You are lying. The daughter said she was telling the truth and then accused the detective of lying. When the detective came back into the room, the daughter changed her story again. Nearly a year later, the detective brought the daughter back in to try to recreate the video that had been destroyed. And again, the kid got the stories mixed up. This was a constant theme throughout this. So the next thing I did was read all of the pretrial depositions that had been recorded. Martin's ex-wife had been deposed twice. Their son had been deposed. The best friend, who is now being called the outcry witness, was deposed. And their daughter was deposed twice. When I was finished reading and putting together all the statements that everyone said, I couldn't believe it. There were over 200 instances where they lied. They said things that were completely either false or contrary to what they had said previously in a prior deposition or an interview with the sheriff's office detective. The most shocking were the differences and inconsistencies and contradictions in the story of Martin's daughter. As her mother said, she was right. She kept getting the stories mixed up. The only thing that she didn't mix up was the one thing she said the punishment every time was for not cleaning her room. Martin has said this from the beginning. He said, if I was doing those things to my daughter, I would never be able to force her to do anything she didn't want to do. I would have no power over her in that home. I wouldn't be able to discipline her. I would certainly never be able to take away her cell phone and her laptop because what would she do? Threaten to tell. The next thing I did was went to a local office store and I enlarged all of the multiple spreadsheets of all the lies, and then I glued them onto project boards. I wanted, I suppose, a visual aid. I have no other explanation for why I did this except for sheer shock value. Now I'm going to hold it up, but what I'm not going to do is hold it up long enough for you to see the specific accusations because they are graphic. And I certainly don't want you to see names. And I have names on here because this was something that I did for the court. This was a piece of evidence that we were entering into court. So I put this together, as you can see. And on that, I will tell you a few of the things that Martin's daughter said because I think it's interesting and I think it's important for you to know how inconsistent her testimony truly was. So when she was asked when these alleged sex acts began, how old were you? Now, keep in mind, these are her answers from the time that she first made the allegations to the videos with the detective to the depositions to trial. These are all of the different times that she opened her mouth and said how old she was when the sex acts began. First, she said, I was 8 to 9. Then she said 9, 12, 13, 8 or 9. I will tell you a few of the things that Martin's daughter said because I think it's interesting and I think it's important for you to know how inconsistent her testimony truly was. So when she was asked when these alleged sex acts began, how old were you? Now, keep in mind, these are her answers from the time that she first made the allegations to the videos with the detective to the depositions to trial. These are all of the different times that she opened her mouth and said how old she was when the sex acts began. First, she said, I was 8 to 9. Then she said 9, 12, 13, 8 or 9, 12, 8 or 9, 9. I don't remember. 13, and I don't remember. That was trial testimony. Now, this is spanning over the course of 2 years. They ask her, what house were you at, the first house or the second house, when these things began? Her testimony was first, second, first, second, second, first, second, first. They ask her point blank, yes, no, yes, no, no, yes, no, yes, no. We went to trial on this. Lastly, she was asked how often these things happened. She said, when mom's not home, when mom's not home, when mom wasn't home, when I was in my room, 2 times, 15 to 20 times, over and over on weekdays, never on the weekends, never during the summer, 2 times, 2 times, and more than once. They ask her again about times. She said, every time mom's not home, every time mom's not home, when mom wasn't home, it happened 2 times. It never happened. It happened every day between 4 and 5 p.m. It never happened. It never happened. It only happened 1 time. And then it was every day for 5 years between 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon and never on a weekend or during the summer. So the next thing I did was go to the sheriff's office to confront the detective who had testified at trial and interviewed everyone in the videos. He was only on the stand for 8 minutes, It didn't take him long to put the final nail in Martin's coffin. So I wanted to talk to him. He was gracious. He brought me into an interview room. We sat down and I introduced myself. And then I pulled out the chart. I'm going to do this. I put it up on the table and I said, "Would you do me the favor, please, sir, of reviewing what's on the chart?" So he did. He stood up, he walked over, and he's looking, and I'm watching till he gets to the bottom. And I said, "I have a question." I said, "You testified at trial that Martin's daughter was consistent between the two interviews that you had with her." I said, "I would like for you to look at all the times she answered and tell me where you see consistency." I gave him a few minutes, and he just stood there shaking his head, looking at the chart. Then he said, "Why didn't the jury see this?" I said, "Well, it would have made a difference, I think. But I put this together myself just in the last week." And he pointed to Martin's attorney's name, and I said, "Yes, they should have put this together, but they didn't." He then said, "Can I show this to the state attorney?" I said, "Sure, go right ahead." I said, "But I will tell you that I'm on my way to her office. I have a chart for her as well." So my next stop was the courthouse. I went up to the state attorney's office and told the receptionist I wanted to speak to Ms. Erin Daly, who was the prosecutor in this case. When she came out, I handed her a copy of the chart, and she said, "What's this?" And I said, "All the lies told by the state witnesses, your witnesses." And she just looked at it and shrugged and said, "Well, it is what it is." And I said, "Well, we'll see about that." And then we had a stare contest. And she said, "I guess I'll see you at sentencing." I said, "Wouldn't miss it." I turned around and left. What I didn't know then, but I would find out 4 years later, was that I was handing her evidence of her own crimes. So I decided to do next what I felt Martin's attorneys should have done, is investigate. In fact, I know they didn't, because when I talked to their investigator after trial, he said he'd never heard of Martin Peterson. So next I decided to go talk to some of Martin's neighbors and see if there was anything else they could tell me that would help me to defend Martin. I was able to find one of the families that has spent a great deal of time at his house. In fact, their son was best friends to Martin's son. After I told them what happened, they were horrified because they had lost touch with Martin once he got kicked out of his house. They didn't know he went to trial. They didn't know that anything had become of these false allegations. I thanked them for their time, and I left my phone number for them to call me if they thought of anything else. The next day, the mom calls me and said, "You won't believe this." She said, "I was talking with one of my friends and telling her about what happened to Martin." She said that we were so upset. And then my friend reminded me that the daughter's best friend, who remember became the outcry witness, the daughter's best friend had falsely accused his uncle of sexual abuse just months before falsely accused Martin. I almost dropped the phone. I couldn't believe it. I said, this is good news. This is awesome. We can maybe use that. There's got to be something more to that." So after hearing that, I asked the neighbor if she would give me the address of the aunt and uncle so that I could go talk to them. And she did. I drove to their house, and they were also gracious, allowed me to come in and sit down and talk with them. They said that they had brought their nephew, the outcry witness, into their home because his mom and grandma wanted him to get some get right. They were having trouble with him, and the uncle said, "You bring him over here. I'll make sure that he does what he's told." So apparently that didn't work for a while, and the punishment for not complying was to dig holes in the backyard, and then once they were all emptied of dirt, he had to go back and fill them in. This didn't sit very well with the nephew. Next thing they know, he has written a note and given it to one of his friends at school with the accusations of abuse by his uncle. The teacher saw the note, took it, gave it to the school resource officer, who, of course, got law enforcement involved. They came to the aunt and uncle's house. They took all the laptops, they took all the cell phones, and the nephew, outcry witness, had to go back and live with grandma, which is what he wanted to do to begin with. When they began to investigate that more, the outcry witness nephew admitted that it was just a joke, that it wasn't true, and that he was tired of doing chores. Sound familiar? I will add that the aunt had actually kept the note that her nephew had written in school, and she gave it to me. And I, of course, scanned it and sent it to Martin's attorney, who wasn't very impressed. But I thought, you know what? I think we're onto something. So the next thing I did was hire a private investigator to go talk to the nephew, best friend, outcry witness. And thankfully, his grandmother agreed to let him, the private investigator, talk to him. So the private investigator met with the nephew, best friend, outcry witness, and his grandmother, and interviewed him for over an hour. When he was finished, he sent me a copy of the recording and his notes, which I forwarded to Martin's attorney. There were a few things that in the report I thought would be interesting to you. And again, I'm not naming names. So he, the nephew, best friend, outcry witness, from now forward would just be called the outcry witness. The outcry witness advised the private investigator that he had met the accuser when she moved to the neighborhood while they were in the 3rd grade. He said they became best friends and that they were very close. In fact, he considered her his sister. He advised that they talked all the time about relationships and other private things. He stated he did not think that she would have hidden something as serious as her being molested by the defendant. He advised that they did talk about their sexual experiences and that he knew that she had been doing sexual things with other people at the time that the allegations were brought against the defendant. He also advised that he never seen anything that would make him think that she had been sexually abused by the defendant. Now realize this is a kid that had spent almost 5 years at the Peterson home, almost every day, and had gone on trips with them. So he knew this family very well. He knew Martin very well. He also advised that she, the accuser, had been arguing with the defendant the day before she had given him the letter that alleged the defendant was sexually abusing her. He advised that the defendant had taken away her cell phone and laptop computer. Why? For not cleaning her room, and that she was mad at the defendant because of it. He stated that there also had been a large amount of loud verbal fighting between her and her mother and the defendant. He advised that he had thought that they were going to get a divorce just prior to the victim showing him the note and making the allegations. He also told the private investigator that the accuser did know what sex was because they had explored their sexuality when in middle school together. In fact, his grandmother chimed in and advised that she had taken away her grandson's computer because he and the accuser had been looking at together. Now, this became important when I gave this information to Martin's attorney. She got quite upset about it. Reason being, during the depositions, she had asked both of them, both the outcry witness and Martin's daughter, if they had ever looked at, because a lot of people say, how would a child, even though she was 15 at the time, how would a child know about all these specific sexual acts if you weren't doing them to her? Well, now we had proof that that wasn't the case at all, and she did know about these things. So Martin's attorney said she had asked them, have you ever viewed, she asked them, have you ever viewed it just you? Have you ever viewed it the two of you together? And every time she asked, both of these kids said no, which now we know was a lie. So she filed an immediate motion for new trial based on this newly discovered evidence. The hearing was granted for October 9th, 2012. The best friend, the outcry witness, came and testified again, and afterwards the judge denied the motion. He immediately sentenced Martin to a minimum mandatory term of life in prison on count 1, 30 years concurrent on counts 2 through 5, and 15 years on count 6. I was devastated. I still can't wrap my head around it. How is this possible? Knowing all of this, and yet that conviction was upheld. How is it possible that people can come into court and flat out lie multiple times and put someone in prison to die? The only thing I kept asking for 4 years was, God, why? Why would you do this? My first husband died by suicide. We had been married almost 25 years. And I know that has nothing to do with this. But when I met Martin, I felt like I could live again. I felt like I could breathe again. And then he's just gone. I'd never had someone in prison. I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew that on paper, he was going to die there. You know, when you get convicted, it feels like the courts throw you in jail or prison, lock the door, and then hide the key. I knew that to bring Martin home, we would have to find that key, more keys than what we already had, so that we could unlock that door and bring him home. I know now that God allowed us to go through that. As hard as it was, and as many times as I told him, I don't understand. I don't understand. It was trauma and stress on a level that is not described. If you have a loved one in prison, or if you have someone who's gone to trial, then you get it. If you have someone who was falsely accused of something that you know they didn't do, then you understand. You understand what I'm talking about. But God allowed that. You can say God caused it. You can say God allowed it. Regardless, God put us on that path to prison, a path that we stayed on for 4 years, 2 months, and 13 days. He did that, I believe now, so that I could be sitting here telling you that there's hope. If you've been wrongly accused, if you've been wrongly convicted, if you know someone who has, there's hope. A life sentence they're just words on paper. They don't mean anything to God, and they don't mean anything to us. God allowed us to go through that so that we could see the flaw in the criminal justice system. The flaw is the jury. I call it the best kept secret by our system is the jury. They're in charge of the verdict. So now we have a company that looks for liars for a living so that we can give our clients a second chance to get their cases reopened, to get back in the courthouse, and have a chance to negotiate something and go home or hold out for a new trial. Now, in addition to my husband, Martin, we also have another client who is free. We have over 40 cases that are reopened and fighting their way back through the courts. As of today, we have worked on 107 cases and found at least one biased juror in every single case. It's an epidemic. Like I said last week, there are different reasons people lie to get on juries. I'm not going to say it again, but they do for various reasons, and we will explore more of those as we go on. We thank you so much for watching and listening. In next week's show, my guest will be the attorney who worked on Martin's appeal. So be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Jurors in Disguise. Until then, if you know of someone who was convicted by a jury, you will find our contact information in the description below. Feel free to reach out. We would love to help you. We thank you again for watching, and remember, the courtroom may be silent, but we won't be. So speak up, speak out, and always speak the truth.